Alright, so for this drawing, what we're going to be doing is using charcoal to describe several objects. These objects, the ones that I selected, I took a bunch of different objects, one having to be glass, the other one was uh, something rough. I chose a rock. You could choose a shell, um, or anything that you see that has a texture that is rough. So when you touch it, it feels like it's rough. So we're gonna start this drawing just the same as everything else, trying to get a sense of the location of all of the objects. I'm starting off with a stick of vine charcoal, so that way any mark that I make can easily be pushed back. So I'm just gonna do some quick gesture sort of marks to get a sense of the location of all these things where I feel like they might be, and when I find that regular object that is man-made, so like the glass bottle that I selected, if you look at um, the example on the side, my reference is essentially a round thing with a ellipse on the top for the mouth of the opening of uh, that glass vase, and then a simple cylinder. And so I want to think of these things in the simplest forms, right? So I started on this side to get a sense of where this is going to be. I went here, and I might have to make some adjustments. The stone is somewhere around here, and then this um, this lemon is over on this side. I'm trying to look at the negative spaces as well as the positive spaces, and then the cast shadows to give me a good idea of where things are. Objects closer to me are going to be lower on the page. Objects further away, in this case, the thing that's the furthest away is actually this lemon, right? And it almost touches this vase. So I'm still kind of feeling things out. I'm not sure if this is the right size, so I'm going to start checking proportions soon. But right now, I just want to get a sense of the space that these objects are going to inhabit, and then I'll start making those comparative adjustments. Um, so, and I look at something so regular as this stone, I want to try to simplify it into something that looks more geometric. It has a top, it has a side. Um, it helps me move it around, push it around in space, and get a bit more of an accurate depiction of it. If things are exactly the same as your reference, that's perfectly fine. It's not supposed to be a mimetic representation. It's an impression of what you see, and how close you get is up to you. But ideally, because we're working from observation, we're trying to get it to at least have some resemblance to that, and be as representational of this object as possible. Right, so I have my objects mapped out. I'm kind of liking their location, and like I said, this vine charcoal is something that can easily push back. And since we're dealing with value, the lightest value that actually happens in this entire drawing is the highlight that happens here. So that means that all of this is going to have to be a little bit darker, right? So nothing can be as white as this, and since the paper is the whitest thing that we have to reserve that white for those highlights that happen there. There's a little bit of a highlight that happens here. Same thing with this. Um, Looking at where this is now, I feel like this strawberry maybe needs to drop a little bit, and this lemon, and then this could maybe grow a tad. So by knocking things back with this, it gives you um, this tool gives you the ability to not be so precise and search for the right shape search for the right proportions. Eventually it becomes a crutch though, so eventually you stop progressing because you're so concerned with it, or you're not sure, or your concern is it's not accurate, and eventually you have to give that up and say, oh, it's about as accurate as it's going to get, and I have to switch to a tool that's more permanent. And in order for us not to use those nasty chemicals like spray fixative and stuff like that, using vine charcoal first, switching to then the compressed charcoal or the charcoal pencils will be the best way to achieve that without getting into the nasty things. At times though, if you're working on something that is gonna have a lot of darks, you kind of have to resort to that because the paper inevitably stops taking any more medium, and you have to do that. All right, so I'm gonna compare some proportions of this strawberry to the lemon, and it's about 2/3. The lemon, the width of the lemon, I'll compare that to the width of the glass vase. It's about a little over half, so I'm within the realm. I think this might be a little bit thick. When you're working on an object that is symmetrical, I always want to look at the axis of this form, right down to the center of it, and then from here to here should be roughly the same distance. From here to here should be roughly the same distance, right? And then all the other nuance will happen, but at least you have a general sense of your proportions of this object. And from the center here, I like to make a cross and look at the distance between the furthest edge to that center, and from that center of that ellipse to the closest edge, and make sure that it resembles what I'm looking at on that side, and that'll help you make some ellipses look more believable. Okay, so I think this is feeling like it's in the right vicinity. Maybe some of these things can get a little bit of an editing in a little bit, but we'll do that in the next phase, which will be getting into your soft charcoal. So oh, actually I'm missing a shadow and a little bit more detail on this strawberry. So before I move on, I want to make sure that all my shadows are established. Looking at where the shadow of this touches this object, how close these two objects come together, where this comes out, and then the shape of that. Notice how it's not really sharp, it's really diffused, right? Glass objects tend to do that. And then once we look through that, because it's glass, we're able to see the shadow through this thing. So as we're drawing transparent objects, which is part of what this is about, the idea is to draw what's behind it and ignore the fact that it has volume and depth and has some sort of dimension, physical dimensionality. Just pretend it's not there. The front side of this glass object is not there, and it'll make things a lot easier to draw. So I'm going to draw that shadow, see where it kind of connects to that, this shadow, and then kind of squint, and I see the light was coming in this direction, right? The shadows are here, so that means the light is hitting these objects like this. So that means all of this will be in shadow. That means all of this will be in shadow. And now we're getting to that strawberry, the odd shape. So this way I'm trying to vertically align the location of that strawberry to make sure that I don't put it too close to this. Right, so I drop a line like this vertically to see where that is, and then I can always smudge that out, and if it becomes too pronounced, then I can just erase it. right? And like I said, this is a very forgiving medium when you're working with this, but it's not intended to be something for permanence, right? Um, some people do use it that way. I don't. Um, I don't, because I don't like to use the nasty chemicals. And then all that texture, I'll eventually get to that. There's a little bit of a shadow here. Out of all these objects now, the thing to make a distinction is like, which is the darkest object? So as I look at all these objects, they have a local color, which is the color that we use to identify the objects. The objects that we're looking at, we have a red one, we have a green one, we have yellow, and we have this stone, and something that's transparent on a white surface. That tells me that red is typically going to be darker than green. You know, that obviously depends on what green we're looking at, but it's typically going to be that way. Reds and blues tend to be darker in value, so that's going to be sort of a constant. Yellows, grays are going to be in the lighter value range. Yellow is kind of a weak color, so it's not going to it's not going to have a dark value consistency. Even if you tone it down or shade yellow, it will register as light in value relative to other colors. Right, so red will typically register as a darker, blue will register as darker, green varies depending on the type of green that you have. And I'm just going around here and making sure that I have a distinction between the light and the shadow masses, and that I have a description of the dark areas versus the light areas. And it doesn't have to be that precise, right? Right now I'm just still kind of in gesture mode. Okay. So the next part is I'm going to switch to my soft charcoal pencil and start making a little bit more defined decisions. And if you notice, as I go like this, I can't spread that around, so I have to be a bit more sure of what I'm doing when I start shifting over to this. I want to get into the areas that now begin to define the objects a little bit more, so I'm holding the pencil a little bit differently, making shapes of value. And then once we have all of these drawn out, then we can switch into doing the textures. So I'm going to focus right now on getting everything to have value and value range. So I'm going to use my blending stump. I'm going to soften some of these things. I'm going to push some of this value around into the background so it's not just white, and get the objects to be a little bit more detailed. And once I have more obvious, I mean, once I have them all on there, that's when I'll switch over and then begin to detail and focus more on the textures of each object individually, so that this begins to appear to be made out of a different material than this, and so on. So this is a good place to sort of stop, step away, assess what it is that you're um, doing, see if there's any room for editing some of this stuff before you then switch over and start getting into the details. So right now is an adjustment period. Um, Look at your different value ranges, see which is the darkest object, and see if you're roughly there. Everything right now is pretty much laid out, and it's a good time for assessment and making sure that you have the information that you need to continue with the drawing. In the next portion, we'll talk about the details and how to establish those details and get a better likeness of that object, and what tools to use to make sure that you can get that to appear as believable as possible. And we'll start with these shadows, getting the shadows out of the way ensures that you don't forget them.